While we're waiting, I'll open this gift. Oh, nice. Just put this on here. Since I don't have a watch,
Put it on for you.
I have to rely on Roger to see what time it is. Yeah. I would definitely see. This is even more accurate than the one that's the atomic watch, you know, that's in, that communicates with the Fort Collins.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah,
yeah, now I always know what time it is.
Cute, love it. Oh, that's cute.
Not how good that was.
And it's, yeah, it's a nice fancy watch
That's
too.
hilarious.
All right. Okay, Diane's here and we're ready to start.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
All right, so let's, we'll do our normal routine here. Paul and I will chant the Gayatri and then, pardon? And then we'll start this session. So if you all close your eyes and take a few deep breaths, relaxing all of your muscles, letting go of all the cares of the day, and concentrating on the subject for discussion. All right, just since we have a small group, let's go around the room and if everyone will just tell us your first name and where you live. We'll start here.
We all live in Las Vegas, right?
I don't know. There may be people from different
Okay,
places.
my name is Dina. I live here.
My name's Roger and I live here.
Susan, and I live here.
Diane, and I live here too. Bonnie, and I live here.
Christine, and I live here in Henderson.
And who's this?
Eugene, and I'm working at Costa Rica.
Oh, smart guy.
You must live in Costa Rica.
I'm Paul and I live in Las Vegas.
And I'm Terry and I live at Ganesha Center.
Liar.
I'm actually homeless. So, we think of ourselves as living in a house in a city, right? But how many of you are right now living in that house in some city? We're talking about the power of now. We're talking.
Not one of us.
We're going to try to shake things up a little bit here. Let's see. I can't see. I'm sorry. I missed your name.
Bonnie.
Bonnie.
Which way?
Let's see. Yeah,
Better?
that's perfect. Now I can see everybody.
Now I
Then
feel
you'll block
lonely.
this.
No, then I'll be the one.
All right. Okay. We're talking about the power of now, and in order to understand it, you really do have to start shifting your concepts. You have to do some work. Paul's been doing Hatha Yoga for a couple of years now, and he's been trying to get me to do it. And he finally succeeded in getting me to start. Well, I remember now why I resisted for so long. There's pain involved. Isn't there?
At first.
At first, okay. Well, I'm finding that in order to stretch, you have to come to the point where you encounter pain, and then you have to push it a little bit farther than that. You can't just stop at that moment, because then you'll never go anywhere. You know, it's easy to do that. Come up to the point where it starts being a little bit painful and say, okay, that's all I can do. And you know what? That's what most people do in life. Because it's easier and less painful. But if you're really going to grow, you're going to have to come up to that point, take a deep breath and say, okay, let me see, let me just tolerate it for a little bit. But there's stretching involved. Whenever there's stretching, and I'm talking mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical, you're going to have to encounter some pain, and you're going to have to be okay with that. And we're going to learn later that there is, in the moment, at the current time, if you're living in the now, come on in.
So sorry.
There's no problem. You're right on time because it is, oh.
Now.
And tell us your names though.
I'm Lisa.
Lisa,
I'm Edina.
I'm sorry,
Edina.
Adina. Did you say Lisa or Okay,
Lisa,
it's not
perfect.
Lisa, it's Lisa,
You got it.
not Liza.
And not Lisa.
Lisa.
Thank
All right, nice to meet you.
you. You too.
And you've got to be willing to stretch, and you have to be willing to make an effort. You know, athletes who want to get into the Olympics, what if they never pushed themselves? What if they never got to the point where it was painful or where they had to get up in the morning and say, you know, maybe I'll just skip practice today? If you're going to be serious about spiritual endeavors and self-transformation, which is everything that we're about, is self-transformation, there's going to be some pain involved. But like Paul said, it's only at the beginning. It's when you're stretching yourself, when you're pushing those boundaries, it is painful. You're getting beyond your comfort zone, and there's no way around that. So be okay with that. Just realize that it's not going to be forever, and that if you're going to expand your consciousness, then there will be some pain. Paul and I, in case any of you are not aware, and I guess we should kind of introduce ourselves. We got some people that we haven't met personally before. Paul and I, several years ago, conducted a class together on Eckhart Tolle's book called A New Earth, Awakening to Your Life's Purpose. And we were so enchanted with this book that we decided to do a 10-month course of study on it. But we brought in some new concepts to go along with it, which come from the theosophical realm. How many people are aware of the word theosophy? A few of you. Okay. All right. Theosophy, believe it or not, is the root of the entire New Age movement. And many New Age people have no concept. Some of them have heard of it, but they are completely unaware that without theosophy, the New Age movement as we know it would not even exist. So we brought in theosophical concepts to merge with this book, and we feel that it created the perfect combination. So what is in our book? It's not the easiest thing to describe. It's not hard to read it, especially if you're somewhat metaphysically inclined. We tried to make it as basic as possible, and in fact it has a 48-page glossary at the back of it to help with some of the terms, not just in this book, but that you will find in other metaphysical books. Many of them, of course, are Sanskrit terms. Many people who are studying, but their real consciousness is as a group, whether it's a flock of birds or as the entire species of that particular bird. They are much more in tune with a greater realm of being than we are. Now, our consciousness went through all of these different stages too, so it has been through them. But as we get into humanity, and even in the earlier stages of humanity, it is more a tribal feel. It's more that the group is the most important and the individual is not so important. But where we're at currently in human evolution, all of that has come to the point where the individual is supremely important and the group only secondarily so. at least from our personal egotistical point of view. But as we continue to grow, that will go back to what is more natural. It's important for us to feel this separation right now. We gain experience that way. Just checking the time. As we grow in consciousness, we become much more in tune with groups who are at the same level of consciousness. And eventually, beyond the Atmic plane, getting back to the question, all of that becomes unity again. So you don't feel an individual kind of adrift in this sea of stuff going on around you. You are the sea, you are the ocean. There's no sense of separateness anymore. That's far in the distance, but this is all part of our self-transformation process. We've got to open ourselves up to a different way of looking at life. And we have to start stretching. Start stretching and be willing to let go of some things. Three things that we talk about a lot in our book, and Eckhart Tolle mentioned them just briefly in his book, but we expanded a lot on them, are the three nons. Non-reaction, non-judgment, and non-attachment. Non-reaction, non-judgment, and non-attachment. Three simple words. It will take you many, many lifetimes to put them completely into practice. But when's the best time to start?
Birds.
We got birds. When is the best time to start? Now. Okay, now. All right, getting to realize that there is more to yoga than just physical postures, that there's an entire philosophy behind it, and a metaphysical philosophy. That is the science of self-transformation. And the classic book on that is Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. How many of you have heard of the Yoga Sutras? All right. That's the book that is the gold standard as far as yoga philosophy is concerned. And it has everything to do with self-transformation. And what are the means for achieving that? Meditation, and through meditation, learning to control your mind. If you can control your mind, you can control everything in your life. That's pretty powerful, isn't it? You can control everything in your life if you can control your mind. People don't realize that your mind is what constitutes your life. And we're going to, this concept of the power of now is key to this. Let's discuss a little bit about time. Oh, I didn't finish telling you about who we are. I get caught up sometimes. I've been studying Theosophy in particular for 38 years now. And even before that I was studying astrology and other metaphysical topics. Once I discovered Theosophy, I thought, this is exactly what I've been looking for years. And in 38 years, I've never changed my mind. I'm a national lecturer for the Theosophical Society, and they send me on different speaking tours around the country. We just got back from New York, and we've previously been to Seattle and Portland and to Los Angeles, and where else have we been? Salt Lake City,
Seattle,
Cleveland.
Portland, Ohio.
Anyway, yeah. So they sent us around different places, but I'm also an international lecturer for the Hispanic section or portion of the Theosophical Society. So They have sent me all over Central America, Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic several times, numerous times, several countries in South America. And I'm going to be going in September to Miami, where they have both a Spanish lodge and a English-speaking lodge, so I'll have one talk in Spanish and one in English. So anyway, they keep me busy, and I keep Paul busy. Whenever his real estate career allows him, he comes along with me and helps teach these classes. And Eugene helps us with promotion and with all of the logistics, which is another job. So that's what we do. Our goal, our mission in life is to help people transform themselves. We can't transform you, but we can give you some tools, and we can give you some hints on how you can achieve self-transformation for yourself, if you want to. It's not easy. All right, power of now. Where in the world did we come up with this idea that there's time? We humans have the idea, I think you will agree, that time is a continuum. There's past, there's now, and there's a future. Is that not how most people think of time? Well, Eckhart Tolle and numerous other spiritual teachers say that we're mistaken. Even scientists say we're mistaken. They say there is no such thing as time. There's only now. There's only now. There's nothing else. There's no past, there's no future, and there's only now. And Eckhart Tolle says that's why it's so powerful, is because that's all you've got. Now, Diane seems a little skeptical.
No,
Okay.
I'm just
Okay.
zoning out, Terry,
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. I do hear you, though.
Okay.
Every word.
And by the way, this is a discussion. We mean to stir up some trouble here. So, so if you disagree,
I have a question.
yeah, there you go. Go ahead.
You mentioned Paul was doing, is it hatha or hatha
Ah,
yoga?
Well-
And is it body or is it mind?
you answer that.
Sanskrit actually doesn't have a th sound, so the way that most translators transliterate the sound from Sanskrit to English language is th, but it's pronounced hatha. Hatha. It's almost like it's two sounds in one. Hat ha. It's a different sound than we normal. So it's hatha. Most English speakers would say hatha because that's the way th is pronounced, and that refers to specifically physical asanas, postures. Out of all the different schools of yoga, we've all heard of different types of yoga: Raja Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Laya Yoga. Hatha Yoga, it refers to physical postures, and pranayama, which is breathing techniques.
Oh. Thanks.
Now,
Sure.
in our book, we just happen to have a Sanskrit pronunciation guide with all of the transliteration for each one of the letters. So, as Paul was saying, what they have to transliterate by putting th is actually an aspirated t sound. So there's both a t and a t. And the difference is very slight, but it's just a slight h sound after it. So there's d, t, t, g, g, and all of these combinations. Yeah, that's,
The Gayatri had a lot of those sounds
and yes,
as well that we were chanting at the beginning.
and you'll notice that there's also, in transliteration, it's done as simply a dot at the end of a word, where there's an aspirate at the end of the word. Om Buhu. So, yes, there's, and that's just in case you want to learn how to pronounce Sanskrit. But this is important because there are many mantras that people know. Some of you know some of these Sanskrit mantras. And part of the power of them comes from the actual pronunciation. So the more accurately you pronounce it, the more powerful it is. All right. time, where did the concept come from? Well, time only exists on the physical plane. How many of you were aware of that? It can only exist on the physical plane and not on any other planes of existence. Now, do you know what we mean when we say planes of existence? Okay. In Theosophy, one of the great tools of Theosophy is that we have been given more of a scientific, why don't you go ahead and pass those out, delineation of the different levels of, number one, consciousness, and number two, existence. Our science, for many, many years, claimed that there was nothing except the physical existence. There's nothing beyond physical. If you can't see it, smell it, touch it, or measure it with instruments somehow, it doesn't exist. Well, they're beginning to realize that that's not true. They're kind of slow to realize this, but what I call esotericists or esoteric scientists have known for thousands of years that this was not true. And they knew that there were different levels and that we can only perceive them as we gain in consciousness. As we grow in consciousness, we are opening up more and more to an ability to perceive these different levels. So what can we perceive right now? Obviously the physical. We can perceive what is called the astral here, because that's where our emotions take place. And we can conceive of the lower part of the mental plane, which is concrete thoughts. You close your eyes and you think of a chair and voila, there you see a chair in your mind. Or you even think of the concept of love, and there's some sort of a concept that your mind can create that it says this is what love is. So that's called concrete mind. Above that is more abstract, and that's where it can't be represented even by words. You have to actually experience it at that level before it is meaningful to you. And then the other levels, Buddhic, the realm of Buddhi, and the realm of the Atma, those are so high that most of us have little or no experience with them. So, yes.
Is that Buddhic level and anything there on up, is that fourth and fifth dimension that you're speaking of
You
now?
can, well, technically, dimensions, people sometimes use the word dimensions with these planes, but that's not exactly correct, because when we're talking physically, when you're talking about physics and they talk about 3 dimensions, they're talking completely in this realm, in the physical realm. So it gets a little confusing when you use the word dimensions to correlate with these levels of consciousness. I prefer not to use that term. I just say states of consciousness or different levels of consciousness.
Well, would the Buddhic be similar to the fourth dimension?
Well, the Buddhic plane is the intuitional plane.
Oh, okay.
That's where intuition comes from. Not gut instinct, because that's astral. But Buddhic is really is intuition when it applies universally, not to anything personal, but universally.
And then the Atma is that?
Atma is the highest, well, I should say it's the highest plane that would pertain to an individual consciousness. We in the human kingdom are about as distinct and separate as consciousness can get. If you look at a flock of birds, for example, they don't perceive consciousness the way we do. There's a little part of their being that perceives me as will disappear. Not all at once. But the physical body dies, Eugene and I had a former neighbor who just passed away yesterday. I went to see him in the hospice at 1 o'clock, and at 3:45 he passed away. When a person dies, the physical body obviously immediately begins to decompose. The life force has left. The emotional energy that has been accumulated will dissipate over a period of time, and that, depending on the individual, can take a few minutes if it's a very advanced person, or it can take several years, quite a few years, if it's a person who has been extremely emotional most of his or her life. And then there is a further period, which is where you receive the results of anything completely unselfish. And I have to hasten to add that a lot of things we think are unselfish in our lives are not completely unselfish. But that period of time will also take up a period before that individual reincarnates in a new personality. But here's the thing. Everything that you thought was so important, relationships, names of people, parties you attended, movies, books you read, all of this stuff will be gone. Gone, gone, gone. And what remains? What remains of that lifetime? Anybody have a clue?
Experience?
Very good. Very good. Christine got it. Experience. That's what you never, ever lose. So, now, you've all had experiences, I know, where you met someone in this particular incarnation and you knew almost immediately that this was somebody that you have a connection with. It can be a negative connection. It may be, oh my gosh, I don't like this person. I don't know why, but I just don't like them. Or it may be that you feel a connection like, I've known this person before. I feel very comfortable with him or her. And you know, there's something we've got in common. So that, yes, you do remember. Any specifics? You know, arguments you had in a previous lifetime? Money that one owed the other one and never paid? You won't remember any of that. Unless you go to a psychic. No. We're going to talk about psychics a little bit later. So time. This timeline of time. How does it occur? It occurs because of one thing. What is it, Roger? I know you know. Concept of time comes about because of, in the physical world, what?
It's just a human concept.
But there's only one thing that can even...
The sun.
The sun. Exactly. There's a cycle that we said, wow, we have light during this time of day. We don't even know to call it a day at this point. There's periodicity. There's a cycle of some sort. So it's light, then it's dark, then it's light again, etc., etc. And it seems to be connected with this ball of fire that kind of looks like it's going across our sky. Of course, we later learned that we're revolving, and it looks like it's going around the Earth, but...
The Earth's spinning.
But what?
The Earth is spinning.
Yes. The Earth is spinning. Now, what if you lived in a cave? What if you were born in a cave and didn't have a TV or a calendar or a watch or any other method of telling time? Not even by temperature, because in a cave the year-round temperature is pretty much the same. So there's nothing at all to indicate time.
Well, it would be irrelevant.
It would be irrelevant, exactly. So it's either now, or you would have some kind of a concept of passage of time, because you would think of something as having happened. Maybe you fell and broke your leg at one point, and you know it healed however it healed, And now every morning, there is no morning, whenever you wake up, you feel a little bit of pain here and you're like, oh, that's right, somewhere in the past I broke my leg. Well, how long ago? I don't know, in the past. You couldn't even measure it. You couldn't say it was 12 years ago or it was, 12 days ago. There's no way to measure it. All you would know is sometime in the past. Isn't this fascinating when you start looking at how time operates?
I know what Lisa's thinking. It did happen though, even though it was in the past.
It did happen.
You were gonna ask it.
Yeah, it's like, get out of my head.
All right, so did it happen or did it not happen?
My question is, how do you know it was his leg if it's dark all the time in
Well, that's
Candles.
right. Yeah, we're assuming that there's some means of, maybe there's a phosphorescent bug, bacteria or something.
Where did they get this
there? Let's get back to round.
Yeah, what if it's completely dark all the time and you don't even,
Just have a pane down there somewhere. that you're not sure.
you wouldn't even know what you look like because you wouldn't have a mirror, would you? Other than, assuming you had enough light, you could see part of yourself.
Probably wouldn't even have eyes, because a lot of the animals that are born in caves don't.
Quit being so scientific.
Actually, this brings up a good point, and that is that biologists have found fish and amphibians that were in a cave, and they can tell by the genealogy that it has only been a few hundred years that they were in that cave, and they've completely lost eyesight. The eyes completely are clouded over with a skin-like substance, and the organ recedes. It begins to atrophy. It's not being used, and it atrophies. So that can happen quite rapidly. But we can also evolve rapidly in the other direction as we expand our consciousness. This is what Raja Yoga is all about, is expansion of consciousness. I wanted to read you something in here about time. And this is what one of the spiritual teachers, if any of you know Alice Bailey, this is something that the Master D.K. said. He said, time is the sequence of the stages of consciousness as registered in the human brain. It is, therefore, a physical event. Physical event. And what else did he say? The stages of consciousness as registered in the human brain. So he further limits it to human brain activity. Animals don't perceive time like we do.
Don't tell my cats that. Time to eat. Set my clock by them.
They wake you up at the same time every morning. They know when it's time for food. But that's
cat people.
Cat people. And in fact, how do squirrels, for example, prepare for winter? Do they know? Do they have a calendar somewhere that says, "Oh, hey, it's September. You know winter's coming up." This is all part of their instinct that has grown up over thousands and thousands of years, and they're in tune with it. We humans are kind of out of tune, as I was discussing earlier. We have kind of unattuned ourselves from nature. We have unattuned ourselves from our species to a large degree. And we focus more on my needs, my personal needs. And that's the way it has to be right now. Because we are gods in the making. We are potential co-creators in the universe. But in order to do that, we have to learn how to do it. And we have to gain the experience that comes through desire. There's a wonderful story in our book about the magic toy, chapter 2. Read the magic toy, and it tells how we gain experience because of our desires. Everything in the universe has desire. Whether it's a bird or an atom, a helium atom has desire, a nematode has desire, geranium, an angel, a human being, obviously, we have desires. But what about the spiritual governor or the spiritual being that is in charge of a universe? That individual or that being, I don't know if you can call him an individual at that point because it's a being, has desire. Otherwise there would be nothing done. Everything that is created comes about from some type of desire. Now our desires are almost entirely self-centered. Even when we say, oh, I'm doing this for your own good, usually it's for mine. It's kind of like the mother that says, here, eat this, it'll make me feel better. At least she recognizes it's about me. Here, eat this so that I'll feel better. You know, we give money to a homeless person so I'll feel better. I feel guilty because you don't have something that I do. So here, take it, I'll feel better. So yeah, if we're honest, we recognize that a lot of the things we do is for ourselves. But as you grow, as you gain more experience, and it really is for the good of the universe. And the selfish part of it disappears. It has to. Because you don't become an enlightened being without getting rid of your ego, which was probably the biggest concept in Eckhart Tolle's book, was how to recognize and then begin to eliminate the ego in yourself. And what our book is about, as we say, is what is our purpose as humans? To become perfect. What does it mean to be perfect? Well, it means that if there is a realm of experience and consciousness that we go through as human beings, there has to be a graduation point. We're not going to be humans for 60 billion years, are we? I hope not. I want to graduate at some point. I want to graduate. So what is graduation? What does it consist of? Well, in Theosophy, and that's where we learned it, it means that you become what we would call the fifth kingdom, or the adepts, those who have passed a certain degree of consciousness, who have developed their consciousness, and it can only come by eliminating the ego. And then they have several choices that opens up to them. And one of them is to go into the angelic kingdom. One of them is to go into other parts of our solar system to help other hierarchies. And one of them is to come back in a human body. Not all of them. Some of them stay connected with our earth, but without a human body, and just operate on the upper levels of consciousness. But a few of them take on an actual human body in order to help the rest of humanity. Now, they aren't out shopping at Neiman Marcus today. They're off somewhere hidden away because in order to operate, they have to be away from all of the hubbub that we create as human beings. Even so-called spiritual beings, we create a whole lot of drama and distraction, which doesn't serve their purposes. So they basically stay away from us and help from a distance. They oversee, to a large extent, the spiritual evolution of our planet. And they work with individual humans, not quite in the way that a lot of them imagine, but they often, whenever possible, will inspire someone. that would be an example of inspiration or Buddhic consciousness. So that's the goal, is to become one of them. But in order to do that, we have to start eliminating ego. A huge part of our ego is our attachment. Attachment to the past and attachment to the future. So are we willing to let go of these memories? Krishnamurti said that he had forgotten almost all of his early life. And other teachers specifically and on purpose just forget it. I can't remember huge parts of my early childhood or even later in life. I just don't put any emphasis on it. I'm not one of these people that goes on Facebook and tries to find every person I went to grade school
Oh
with.
my God, yeah.
It has no interest at all to me.
Mm-mm.
Paul
I do.
does.
You're staying on top.
He's beginning to find that it's not quite as important as he thought it was, though.
And it's not the same. We try to recreate these awesome experiences we had, and it never is the same. It's like going to Disneyland as an adult when you remember it as this absolutely the pinnacle of joy as a kid, and it's not the same.
No.
At least to me, it's the same concept.
That's true.
All right, I think you have something.
Do we need to
share
take a
with us.
restroom break? It's been an hour. Should we do that? For just
Stand
five?
up, right?
5 minute break?
I think a quick, like 3 to 5 minute break. Sure.
Yeah.
Before we.
I did pretty good, didn't I?
I'm gonna leave my purse here.
And I didn't fall asleep.
That was Eugene who was looking
Yeah,
at first.
Eugene.
It's Eugene, that's right. You sat in my purse
It's
too.
pretty bad of me to do that, but I'm telling you, when I was like next time, I was thinking all the way down like this, I was, oh my God, guys.
This is a lot simpler than the one I had.
They
We had all-
into us. That
Well,
isn't
I know.
That makes sense.
Well, you're right. No, we wanted to make it as simple as possible for the folks. Well, you study some very detailed advanced stuff, and we can get there, but we wanted to make it
No,
accessible.
I'm just saying, that was quite a big step there.
It's just the basic concept.
So the jargon in here is much more logic, we can follow it.
Yeah. Our goal with that was to make it accessible to people who might not have much history with spiritual studies
I
concepts.
feel that you're on a path of spiritual development, or you probably wouldn't be here today. But what is the most important step in this path of spiritual development?
Probably the first step.
The first step? Anyone else have a different idea? The most important one is the one you're taking right now. It's the only step. There's only one step in spiritual development, and it's the one you're doing right now. You know, you can go mountain climbing, and you can stand at the foot of the mountain and look up, and what's your perception? Wow. Okay, so you're saying, okay, I have to get from here up to there. And then once you get up to the summit, then what? Then what happens? Then you look down, yeah, and you have to
Descend.
go somewhere else. So Eckhart Tolle says, and everyone else who knows something about this, is that there's no goal that you have to reach. You just have to have the right attitude, and you've already reached it. Because it's already within you. We're going to tell you a little bit about how the past is within you too. A lot of people say, well, I would be nobody without the past. You know, I have specific memories, you know. I can compare an event with other people and they all agree it did happen. You're telling me it didn't happen. And I still tell you that it didn't happen. How many of you have ever compared memories of your early lifetime with some of your siblings?
I have no siblings, so I can't do it.
Oh, okay. Well, even friends, you know. I remember talking to my sisters about things that happened. They're just like, "Are you crazy? That one? I don't remember it being like that at all." Have any of you ever encountered that? It's
Yes.
like, did we have two different sets of parents? But it's absolutely true, and I was shocked when I realized that their experience was entirely different from mine. I'm like, well, what's going on here? So, being some person who thinks about these things, I lie awake at night and think about these things. I want to know how life works. That's my number one goal. I want to figure out how life works. And I do. I contemplate, I meditate on it, and I just simply think through a situation. And I very often get answers. It's very seldom that nothing comes. But you have to make an effort. So, when you compare these memories, which one is correct? All of them? What if none of them are correct?
Well, aren't they the separate experiences? I mean, the perceptions?
Yes. How many of you know Don Miguel Ruiz? How any of you have read some of his books? He has a very good little analogy. He says life is like a movie theater. You go into this movie theater, you're the only person in the theater, and you look up at the screen and it's a movie about your life, and guess what? You're the main character. But there's no one else in the theater. So you go out and you say, well, I want to go see somebody else's movie theater. So you go into someone else's movie theater, and it's all about them. And you're just one of the characters that happens to be in their film, but they're the main character in their own movie. And he says life is like that. In other words, we live in parallel universes. You have your universe, and every other person has his or her universe. It's kind of scary, isn't it? To think that we're living in our mind, aren't we?
It is.
It is scary when you realize that you're the only person that has that universe. You live in a universe of one. And when you go to sleep at night, during the time when you're unconscious, that universe disappears. It disappears. And then as you come into dreaming consciousness, it partially rematerializes. And only when you become wide awake, what we call wide awake, which is not anywhere close to it, does your universe come back into full existence. Is that a different way of looking at life? Your universe disintegrates every night. You didn't know that, did you? You did too.
You told me that before.
We're going to hear from him later, so he's just saving up all his wisdom. So I've always been intrigued with this concept of time and why it doesn't work quite the way we think it does. Let's try an experiment right now. Everybody close your eyes. Close your eyes. And in your mind, reconstruct everything in this room. The chairs, the people, whatever the decorations are, whatever the lighting is, all of the accessories. Do you remember what different people were wearing? Make it as complete and accurate as you can. And I want you to count the number of people in your mind. How many people are in this room? All right, now open your eyes. How accurate was it? How many of you counted 9 people? How many counted 10? How many counted 11? How many weren't sure?
I counted 12. Because they added Eugene back there.
All right. So, how accurate were you on what people were wearing?
Regardless, I remember everyone shoes.
Ah.
Versus.
How many of you counted versus? Oh. How many
You see
of
Rogers?
you remembered the picture of the ship over here? A few people.
Because just before that, it was interesting, I'm thinking, just before you said for us to do that,
Mhm.
I was checking the color of the
Ah.
walls here and the carpet.
Ah,
I'm-
see, you
I was
had
a
a
little step
premonition.
ahead of,
I
yeah.
was going to ask that. Very
Yeah.
good. So, what I'm trying to point out here is that our perceptions are not at all accurate. You know, if you concentrate on something right now, I mean, I could look at Susan and I could kind of make some mental notes about the color of her toenail polish and whether or not it's the same as her fingernails and whether there's a design here, and I would have to make a long list, but mentally I would have to actually concentrate on that. We look at something and what do we see? We just get like a general vague impression. But we're only talking physically here now. We're not even talking about anything else, personality, about her character traits, about her experience in life, etc., etc. We're just talking physical. That's only one minor part of existence, tiny part of it. All right, are you guys getting shaken up a little bit here yet?
Back to your point that you made about if you're sharing something with your siblings and recanting experiences,
Mhm.
then could we say that the experiences, the way that I remember them, are valid?
Is it valid? Okay, that's very good. Is it valid? What does everybody else think? Are these experiences valid?
To her they are.
Yeah.
So then it doesn't really matter, does it?
Yeah.
You know, this is kind of eye-opening when you realize that things that seem to be so important to me very often are completely unimportant to other people. And they, only if our wishes and our desires kind of coincide does it seem to be meaningful to both of us. And even then, they have a very different perception of it. They're coming from a completely different point of view. So, our self-expression, our ego kind of takes a jolt when that happens. we think that our life is very important, and it is, but maybe not in quite the same way that we think it is. I'm going to shake you up a little bit more here. At the end of your life, how many of you believe in reincarnation, or at least that it's a possibility? All right. At the end of your life, this personality, which is made up of your physical body, your emotional state, And
I'd like to
you're,
get a library.
but whether or not they.
But there's a connection from the
Because
pastor
there's
saying.
so
I
much
really
information, if I
question
see one show, then
Do you need to tell me it might
the next time around, I see it
I always
again.
thought
like,
they were very feaster family ways.
Maybe it may be
Yeah.
on track, not necessarily the legend part.
Oh, yeah, we started to talk about that, but we didn't.
That
So it's kind of puts things in perspective.
Yeah, I
that
signed up
you're
for
doing
just
now, kind of understand why
the
you
18th,
have to be your life.
Yeah.
Person?
which is a
Yeah.
Saturday.
And many of them are not.
Are you gonna go,
even
Bonnie, are you
human
interested in UFOs?
Even though they
I
may
didn't sign up for it,
Trying to
but-
reach out and interested.
Well, that's the
Something
whole
you
idea of
said made it sound
causality. What we set in motion
Yeah.
before has to work itself out somehow. It usually doesn't happen.
That was-
With a
that was-
little, in a little
Several
lunch.
lifetimes
I
later.
think it'll be fascinating.
Balance out what we
I've
started
often
before.
wanted to
That makes
go,
sense
but
to me.
they drive
It
and
did
they
long karma.
explain
It
These
makes sense.
Did you sign up for that?
are-
Parallel
I
lives,
didn't.
no. Some of the lives I'm having.
Yeah, I was
They
going to, I was
are
going to go Saturday, and I was
What do you
talking
think
to
about
Bonnie
parallel
about it, and
lives?
she wanted to go. Then by the time I wanted to go, it was going to go at night, before
like
the
a
couch
you
one,
feel
and then they didn't
the
have it
trial
there.
perceives him as a-
And so now maybe
another
they
child.
have, the problem is
So
that going into the,
kind of-
day
I wanted to ask him
to,
about
Just like our
Rachel.
animals, you know,
Is Terry
we
about
make
it?
it
Oh,
interesting.
okay.
Yeah, get out
So
and
we
walk
kind
around,
of
and we're
impose
talking to
our
So like your
expectations
the worst
on these
like
energy.
Soul has a second
And if we-
physical body.
But I mean, I don't do
them as
well
an
in
animal
heat.
Wayne was
Yeah, I mean,
talking about that.
I don't do good in heat, she doesn't do good in heat.
So if anything, even if I can't figure it
Because
out,
then the
it's just
nighttime
like,
one wasn't.
And
you know,
so
I've come to the point where I can really zone
You've got
out
other
and I.
times too.
Even
I'm just during the day.
It's just fascinating.
From
It is
4,
fascinating.
something
And
4
we'll-
to.
4 to midnight?
Yeah, something like that.
But that one was,
Vivify it.
was
And
good.
the
So
fact that I
That's what it's all about.
And there's others from 8 in the morning to.
That's what I was talking about.
What is it, like
because
a white noise or just like
I
a?
don't-
It's guided.
Oh, it's someone
Yeah,
speaking.
it'll be 110 in Las
Margaret is
Vegas
here,
at
and
8 in
she's
the
telling
morning
you.
in July.
Would it be
with
cool
the
in there?
humidity.
She used to make bread for you every week.
I don't think
I
much
don't know.
cooler.
I'm
I,
going from noon
but that's
to
what
9
I
to 9.
Oh, they have different ones,
and I don't
yeah.
find them
The
particularly
Thursday.
helpful.
Well, I guess they must have added more than, and,
I think I'm
do they?
really looking at it
Okay.
from the
But I think it's a great idea to
Standpoint.
do it, but
Okay.
it's a matter of
All right, I think we're
going to
ready.
give them heat, so.
Are we missing? No.
How's the video, Eugene? Is it rolling?
All right, go on.
Oh, they're
Go
really
ahead.
good.
Okay. Much more sense than I had ever been exposed to from the Christian teachings that I was brought up with. So after attending his courses in basic theosophy, I thought that this is something that I need to just dive into, and I wanted to do what he does. I wanted to learn from him and share these concepts with everyone, because I was passionate even at that early time. So I tried my best to become his friend and hang out with him as much as possible. See if he liked me. So that was around the time when he mentioned a New Earth class. This was a bonding experience for us. We created our 10-month class outline and brought in the theosophical concepts and just had such a wonderful time that we thought we could work together further and put our new ideas that came out of those classes into our book. And so in July of last year, we finished this, and it has 2 different physical copies and 3 digital versions. So the soft cover, there's a hard cover, and all 3 ebooks, Nook, Kindle, and the Apple iBook.
And soon the Spanish translation will be out.
And it's actually done being translated. Terry's just working on some of the formatting, and it will be available in Spanish soon. So the journey has been very, very cool. I'm much newer to the world of spiritual studies than he is, but I'm learning as much as I can, and I love it so much that I want to help share it too. So that's why I'm sitting up here with him.
One of the reasons Paul shares it with everybody is he's had 2 classes in the introductory that he was the teacher in.
That's right.
That's true.
He taught the course himself.
I was honored to be able to lead the group, the study group on this book. After taking Terry's twice, I led my own. He helped, of course. Couldn't have done it alone, but that was probably a 7 or 8 month course, and we did that at Roger's office, and we had probably between 5 and 15 people coming to hang out and discuss and talk. And some people show up and talk about it one time. Some people like to come for the whole series, but some of the information resonates with some people and it doesn't with others, and that's the point. It's not supposed to make sense to everybody because we're all at different stages. We all are attuned to different aspects of our spiritual path, and we're all on our own individual path. There's no one way to the peak. We're all walking on a different path. We're creating our own path to our own peak. So that's the beauty. And another beauty of theosophy is that it's completely open-minded with no dogma, and there's no requirement to believe anything. It's just a comparative study of all religions, science, and philosophy together. So Eckhart Tolle's first book was The Power of Now, which I believe it came out in 1999, if I'm not mistaken. So this was the foundation, and then his A New Earth book just took this and blew it out of the water exponentially, so to speak. But the concepts in this book are the foundations. And I'm going to read a few passages from this book and then just discuss them. At the beginning of the book, he talks about the Buddha's definition of enlightenment. And I'm sure you've all heard it. Does anyone know what the Buddha describes as enlightenment? It is the end of suffering. As simple as that. The end of suffering. That definition is kind of funny because it's a negative definition. It tells you what enlightenment is not. It's not suffering, but what is enlightenment? What actually happens? What do you do? Well, he doesn't say anything. He leaves it up to us to figure it out on our own. And that was, 2,500 years ago when he talked about that. How long ago was the Buddha about that? So that leaves room for modern teachers like Eckhart Tolle and other contemporary spiritual teachers to come in and give today's practical information for us to apply to our lives and use in the world. So what does Eckhart Tolle say enlightenment is? Well, he says enlightenment is a state of wholeness, of being at one and therefore at peace. At one with the manifested world and with being, with a capital B. We'll talk about that in just a second. But being whole and being at one, well, does that mean that people who aren't enlightened aren't whole and aren't at one? I don't think so. I think everyone is whole, everyone is at one, we just don't know it. Our eyes aren't open to it. As Terry was saying earlier, it's already inside of us, we just have to recognize it. We're all the ocean. We're not individual drops, we are the ocean, we just don't realize it yet. The human kingdom, as Terry was saying, is the most fragmented, perceived that way. We perceive ourselves to be completely individual, unlike the flock of birds moving in unison and the schools of fish that swim completely in sync, and a hole opens up in the school of fish when the shark tries to eat some of them. Just without even, and then they could even have their eyes closed, and it's just natural. They're much more connected. They haven't reached the human kingdom, which is much more fragmented. It's for a very distinct purpose too. It's for our experience. It's our challenge that's given to us. The ego and the sense of separateness is there for us to work through and move through and learn from. There's friction and there's resistance here in the physical world. And that's the whole point. That's the whole purpose of being here in the physical world, is to work through that friction, work through that resistance of dense matter to regain connection with our soul. And I believe that's the main purpose of our existence, is to reach the soul connection, is to become one with our soul instead of having physical body consciousness and mind consciousness. Eckhart Tolle says we're identified with the mind. We're identified with the physical body. Does anyone know what he means by that? Being identified with your mind? It's thinking that Roger is Roger. He's a man. He wears glasses. He's an engineer. And that's it. He's put him in a box, label it, done. That's Roger. Okay, done. Who's next? Human beings are so much more than that. There's so much more depth to a human life. And if we can recognize that, life takes on a whole other dimension. If we can realize that we are a beautiful soul that's just one aspect of us is representing ourselves in a physical body, just one aspect of our true self is this whole physical body that we have here. It changes our perception. It reorients our consciousness to our soul. And the soul consciousness is where true bliss, true inner peace, true beauty exists, instead of being caught in suffering, which the Buddha says we have to move past in order to reach enlightenment. All right, a little bit more about being. Eckhart Tolle uses the word being a lot. And one of his students asks, well, is being synonymous with the word God? And if so, why don't you just say God? Eckhart Tolle's answer to that is being is an open word and an open concept, and it doesn't cause you to think of definitions like God does. If someone says God, what do you immediately think of? What's the first thing you think of when you hear God?
Religion.
Okay, religion. Some people will think of a man or an anthropomorphized idea of the divine. it's been used so much and used, misused, and it's been interpreted so many different ways. He tries to move away from God, and he uses the word being. His actual definition of being is the eternal, ever-present one life, beyond and within the myriad forms of life that are subject to birth and death. I'll read it one more time. Being is the eternal, ever-present one life, beyond and within the myriad forms of life that are subject to birth and death. So it is the divine. What is the greatest obstacle to enlightenment? Anybody know? The greatest obstacle to reaching enlightenment.
Our ego.
Okay. Yeah. Basically, yes. It's the mind, or the ego, which is mind-made. Exactly. The physical brain and the mind are different. Theosophy teaches us that they're completely separate entities. The physical brain here operates much of the time on its own, and the mind or the mental body is actually at the level of the mental plane, which is a different state of existence. But the idea that thinking happens to us and we don't think, but it happens to us, that's the opaque screen or the obstacle to enlightenment. And it's also the idea of being stuck in the past or future without knowing it. It creates an opaque screen of concepts, labels, images, words, judgments, and definitions that block all true relationships. So Eckhart Tolle says, when you say you think, it's the same thing as you saying, I circulate my blood or I digest my food. We don't actually have to like move a muscle over here and digest our food and like think about our heart contracting to circulate our blood. It happens to us, right? It happens automatically. And he equates the physical brain to that too. It goes by itself. And that's the biggest obstacle to enlightenment, learning how to control the mind and go past the mind into our true being, which is the beautiful soul, which has no sex, no gender, no time, no suffering. It's the idea of controlling the mind through Raja Yoga and meditation. He says that it blocks all true relationships. Well, what does he mean by that? If my mind-made concept of myself, I'm Paul, I'm so-and-so years old, I do this for work, and I wear these clothes, that is interacting with you who's wearing this. That's a mind-made concept interacting with another mind-made concept. It's not the true being interacting with the true being. A good meditation that I like to do is I like to connect, imagine myself connecting with my loved ones or anyone in my life at the level of the soul. Instead of going up to someone and giving them a hug and seeing their physical being with your eyes and listening to them speak with your ears, you can imagine connecting with them at a higher point, and that can be true. That's where the true relationships happen. Eckhart says that thinking too much and labeling and judging blocks all true relationships. What does he say about pain? Terry and I kind of argue about this a little bit. Terry says...
I'm right.
There's Terry's peek out.
No ego. I'm just telling you the truth.
We don't argue. He just knows more than I do sometimes. Okay. E.T. and T.H. Terry Hunt and Eckhart Tolle. They both say that pain can't exist in the now. If you're completely present, pain cannot exist. Eckhart Tolle says the pain we create, which is also interesting, the pain we create always comes from some form of non-acceptance of the present moment, some unconscious resistance to what is. Now, when the present moment is unpleasant, when we have physical pain or emotional pain, it is happening, right? You can't deny the fact that it's happening. If we fully accept it and understand that at some level it's ours, somehow, we don't have to say, okay, I physically created this exactly, but at some level we did. It's important to recognize that. It loses a lot of its importance, and it doesn't have power over us anymore. At the level of thought, pain manifests as judgment. Emotionally, it manifests as negativity. And the intensity of pain we experience depends on the degree of resistance we have to the present moment. That's very interesting to hear. The intensity of pain depends on the degree of resistance we have to the present moment. The more we're able to honor and accept the now, the more we are free of pain. Maybe you're right.
Eugene has a question.
So put that into terms for childbirth and kidney stones. I mean, something like,
All of this will be with you. Yeah, you can't get rid of it, so you're stuck.
Not a bad place to be stuck.
It's not. He actually says it's the eternal present, which is another concept. The eternal present is the space in which our whole life unfolds. It's a series of nows. It's a series of never-ending nows, always. And he asks a very important question to us. Have we ever done anything, felt anything, thought anything that was not in the now? Has anything ever happened that wasn't in the now? If you remember the past, you're remembering it in the now, and we're recreating it now. And if we choose to allow ourselves to suffer over it, well, that's our own issue.
But what about the future?
It's being created now. We're thinking about it right now. There is no future because it always happens in the now.
But what about the past? I remember the past.
But when are you remembering it?
No.
Now.
When did it happen?
Well, I don't know.
Now. Then.
Now. Actually,
The now of then.
See, this is exactly right. This is what he's pointing out is, as I was mentioning earlier, our memories are very, they are very incorrect. They simply are not accurate at all. So what do we have? We have our current perception of what we think we remember happened somewhere in what we call the past. But it is all happening in the now. And is it important? I'm saying no, it's not. So, you know, you have to spend you have to spend the rest of your life sorting this out for yourself. I don't spend any time going through old photographs, either on the computer or once in a while I'll come across something, there's
You don't
something.
do Facebook? You don't do Facebook?
He's the last one on earth.
I don't even, I have things that I own that maybe put away in a drawer somewhere, and I'm like the person with Alzheimer's who meets new people every single day. They all open a drawer and say, oh my gosh, I forgot that I even owned that. It's just like, I don't know, if it's not there in present, then it doesn't exist.
So it doesn't matter about our past experiences making us who we are today.
You
now.
are who you are
We
no matter what, so you can't change that. That's not ever going to change. And the people in your life, this is the biggest question. What about the people in my life, especially someone who has passed on? Your connection, as Paul was pointing out, is at the soul level, not at the personality level. I become more aware of this as time goes on. My mother passed on 8 years ago now, and I don't ever dwell on events. I don't go back and say, oh, I remember this particular birthday that she made me this or that. No, it's about quality. It's about the quality of her being as a person. And not as a personality, but her highest qualities, her soul qualities. That's what I perceive. I never feel any lack of connection. And I don't ever dwell on any sense of loss. It's completely at a different level of existence. But it took me a little while to get to that. But why can't I do the same thing with current relationships? Why can't and maybe I can. Maybe I can relate more at a soul level and less on a personality level. Maybe that's more important.
I have just 2 last points, then we'll do a little fun thing.
Yes.
Okay, life-threatening situations.
you know, 'cause
I'll make Terry answer that.
I know I've practiced sort of like being an acceptance of the
Well,
situation.
and this is exactly what Paul's objection was. And he said, if my body is in pain, if I've cut myself or experiencing a kidney stone, I'm in pain. How can you say that there's no pain if you're living in the moment? Well, I say that you're remembering something from the past.
Prior kidney stones. so-
Well, no, I'm talking about a nanosecond ago.
It's very true.
You're reacting to something, because how do you experience pain? It's a nerve impulse that has to travel to the brain and has to be registered, and then there's some perception. You have to perceive it as pain, correct?
It's more of a past life issue than it is an current life issue. That I've seen for me personally, and that's my feeling about it. What do you think?
Well, I think it's pretty current.
No, it's
But-
happening now, but you are experiencing pain from another lifetime that you're bringing into
Oh, you're
this
talking
time.
about karma.
I'm talking about kidney stone pain.
I am too.
Oh, okay.
We're on the same page.
Okay.
You said it was in the past, and so,
Well, let me approach it from a little bit different perspective. Your body perceives pain as a self-preservation technique. If you didn't feel hot, if you put your hand on a stove and didn't feel anything, you would end up with severe disfiguration of your physical hand, wouldn't you? We perceive that as being dangerous, and we feel it as pain in order to preserve the existence of the body. Now, what about a yogi who has overcome all need for that and is able to close it out at will? What if he knows enough to take his finger off the stove after having touched it, and it's still hurting, and what if he just simply chooses not to perceive that as pain? Now he has a choice because he's more conscious, because he's more aware. The average individual hasn't arrived there yet. So they're still, like Diane says, basing it on previous lifetimes and previous experiences.
it's more chronic issues. You're talking immediate issues.
Well, I'm
but there is
talking both.
Mhm.
Once you become more aware, you have more options. You're able, even if you were in the midst of a kidney stone attack, you could choose to go into a meditative state and simply close that off as being a perception of pain. So, the truth is, it really is in the past. It is, you're remembering, even if it was a nanosecond ago, something that happened, and if you're enlightened, you can choose to close it off because it's not going to help you physically one way or the other. It's actually going to help you physically if you're able to put the pain at ease, because you all know that stress causes stress on your body, and it causes more illness. So if there's nothing that you can do about it, you go into this state of non-reaction, which means that you no longer feel the pain. So that's what I say about it.
But how would you do that, Terry? What is the process by which you would
it
do
takes
what you're talking about?
It takes a period of time to learn how to do that. It's not that you can just make up your mind and say, okay, I'm going to shut it off. And you have to be very careful about that. People do that with emotional pain all the time. They shut it off, but it doesn't end it. All it does is repress it and stick it in that bag on the back of your back.
Yeah.
At some point you do have to deal with it. So you have to be aware enough to know whether or not that pain is trying to tell you something, and you need to assess it and process it. It all has to be processed. All energy has to be processed. You can't ignore it. So the enlightened person at least knows which ones he can safely turn off and which ones need to be processed.
That's a very good point, because that's right, exactly.
For self-preservation. There's another way to do this blockage of the sensation of physical pain too, and it's been scientifically proven. It's through hypnosis. And hypnosis and meditation are not the same at all, but it is scientifically proven that we have the ability to flip a switch in our body to not experience pain. I like to watch the Science Channel a lot, and there have been documented studies on hypnosis during dentistry, for example. And it happens. The dentist can help the patient go into a state of being hypnotized and then perform drilling and the patient doesn't feel a thing. There's no anesthetic at all. So we know it's physically possible to do that. Eckhart Tolle says consciousness is the way out of pain. True awakening. Consciousness and being mind-oriented are opposites. And he also says that the mind needs time to operate. The brain, time and mind are inseparable. So how do we get rid of time in order to move past mind? That's what we're here to talk about. So what if the present moment is unpleasant or awful? All right. That happens a lot, obviously. He says that we first need to observe how the mind labels it and how our continuous judgment of the present moment causes a lot of our pain and unhappiness. If we think, oh, it shouldn't be this way, life is unfair, that alone causes the majority of the pain that we feel about the present moment. If we find ourselves being born in a family maybe in Eastern Europe during some of all the wars that have been happening in the last part of the last century, we might think, oh my gosh, this is a terrible situation. Why have I been born in this? Well, you can create extra pain and suffering by thinking it's not fair and I shouldn't be here. Or you can accept it because it is happening. I'm not saying it's easy at all, but being conscious about it and watching your mind label it or not label it can be a way out of some of the unhappiness that we're experiencing. By watching the mind, we can free ourselves from its patterns and allow the present moment to be as it is. This is the beginning of inner peace. Then, action can be taken if necessary or possible. He says, accept it first and then act. This will miraculously begin to transform your whole life.
Let me interject something here. Another thing that he points out in another part of his book is the non-reaction part. And that, an example he gives is in the middle of the night, a car alarm goes off outside your window. You can either be annoyed and, just like Paul said, it shouldn't be that way. Why is someone so stupid as to, not turn it off immediately, and then it goes on and on and on. Or you can simply not react to it. But you have to make a conscious choice to do that. When you react to something, you set up almost like a soundboard or a surface for it to hit against. And when you do not react, it opens up everything else so that it penetrates you, it goes right through you and doesn't affect you. It's like a soundboard on a piano. It emphasizes the sound because it has something to bounce off of. But if there were no soundboard, all the sound would get absorbed by the surrounding atmosphere and it would sound very, very light. So we set up that resistance. It's through resistance, and it reacts on us and it causes stress. So you can either choose to let that go and just say, it'll end when it ends, and I'll just be at peace. He has another thing that he says that I like. He says instead of if someone keeps you waiting, you have an appointment with somebody and they show up and you've been waiting for 20 minutes and they say, oh, I'm sorry. And he says, oh, it was okay. I was just in joy in myself. I was just in joy in myself. So non-reaction, non-resistance, some people would get very upset. How dare you treat me like that? But it does no good. All it does is make you ill and creates resentment. So you get to choose whether you react or whether you resist. It's your choice.
So if time really is an illusion, and if we do succeed in eliminating it, a question that often comes up is, well, without time, how would we function in society, and how would we ever have a goal and work towards a goal from now until then if there's no time? Well, there's an important distinction between clock time and psychological time. We need to understand what clock time is and put it in its place and not allow it to become our own personal psychological time. If we allow events that happened in the past to become psychological time, that's the whole concept of dwelling on the past and worrying about the future. And if we're trapped in mind, we're basically trapped in regret and anticipation, and we forget about the power of now. And those are two dangerous places to be. We need to understand that clock time needs to be used for practical purposes. We find ourselves in a society where we have to understand about appointments to be set and getting to work and shaking yourself.
25 years ago, I put a watch down and I said I will no longer let it rule my life.
You got to this class on time.
I did. I think my dog told me to come.
Good point.
I was going to point that out. You know, in order for us to all meet at the same time, we have to have some sort of a
Sure you do.
timepiece
Yes.
that says we're going to meet at 1 o'clock on certain such and such a date. But as Paul also pointed out, then you let it go.
And
If you
return
said,
to
oh,
presence.
you know, at 1 o'clock, on June, whatever day I don't even know what day it is.
Now,
Now, I was at this class and so was there, and if that's important to you to try to keep that all in different compartments in your mind, then you're not living in the now. Whatever experience you experience during this class, you will carry with you forever. Not just this lifetime, but I'm talking about forever. This will change your life forever. Every moment of your life changes your life forever. So you carry that experience with you. You don't have to reflect on it. I mean, you can reflect on some of the concepts if you want, but you don't have to review everything. I very seldom take any notes during a class. I would rather absorb what I can. Once in a while, if I need to make note of a book that I want to remember or something, I'll make a couple of notes, but I never spend a lot of time writing during a class. I want to be present. I want to absorb as much as I can. And
As
then
realize
in the
this,
future-
if you're in a state of frightened state or shock or something dangerous is happening around you, you'll notice later that you were completely present and you were almost forced into that present state, and that's a little glimpse of what the now is about, and we're working to be able to enter that state on our own. And if you notice that certain people like dangerous sports, rock climbing, race car driving, hang gliding, something that can be life-threatening or dangerous, they like that because there's an incredible sense of joy and peace when you're present and when you're free from your past and free from worry about the future. It's an intensely alive state, free of problems, free of thinking, and free of the burden of personality. Isn't that an interesting concept? When you're present, you're free of the burden of personality.
I like that.
Wow. And the last thing that I wanted to present are a couple of easy tactics on how to access the power of now. Very simple. Watch your mind. Understand that there's a separation between you and your mind. It's very easy. Notice how often your attention is focused on the past and how often your attention is focused on the future. Just notice it. When you start watching what your mind does, it shocks you into the now, and you start realizing, wow, I'm thinking a lot about what happened or what might happen, and who cares anyway? What about what's happening around me right now? So just be the watcher. He calls it the silent watcher. Watch the thought, feel the emotion, observe your reaction to things. Once you do that, you realize that you're far more than just what thoughts we automatically, habitually have in our brain.
All right, so we've talked quite a bit about the past, and now the future. Does the future exist?
No.
Only in your mind. Only in your mind. And what is it usually? Anticipation or fear, usually. You're looking forward to a big party you're going to go to. Anticipation. Or you're fearful because you've got an exam coming up and you don't feel that you've prepared for it. So what are you doing? You're creating anxiety, you're creating stress in the now based on your ideas. This is all in your mind. Nothing has happened. And it at this moment in time, it's absolutely unimportant. Now, yes, you do have to do preparation sometimes. We have to live life. We have to have goals and we have to do what we can. But how important is it? I like to ask myself, 100 years from now, how important will this be? That kind of puts things in perspective, doesn't it? And in almost every single case, the answer is not at all. So don't be afraid to ask yourself, 100 years from now, how
But
important?
isn't there some mind chatter that is of higher thinking and of higher,
Not the mind chatter.
or I don't know if that's the correct word, but
Good.
no, even if you're being aware of the chatter, isn't that like a higher thinking or?
Well, as you practice Raja Yoga, which is the science of meditation, you achieve different levels of awareness, and the mind chatter disappears. You have to let go of the mind chatter. Then you can start to be in control of the mind, and you're also in a state where you can receive illumination or intuition.
I want to say though that I think yes, 100% it is, because you said the most important thing. It's noticing the mind chatter. That's the hardest initial step. It's the separation. You noticed your mind chatter. That's actually what he talks about in the introduction to this book. He actually describes his enlightening process. I'm not sure if anyone knows.
I still think of my intuition as thoughts though, and I don't know how to differentiate, in words to describe, but
As you become more aware.
sometimes I read about Eckhart, I just feel like you're such a dud,
Okay, but why do you say that?
just because of like what I was just explaining. I feel like my intuition and goals I may have that guide me, my intuition guides me toward goals are not necessarily a chatter, but they're thoughts. They're
Okay.
that I shouldn't turn them off, so to speak. Especially the awareness of my chatter. Yeah.
Yeah. He talks about the voice in the head. We call it the monkey mind. And it's the standard state of affairs for almost everyone.
Right.
So you really will make the best progress once you get past that, once you are in control.
But you might be doing contemplation, where you
Yeah.
allow
The first
yourself to think about a concept, and you might receive some type of intuition about it.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a much higher state than just mind chatter, though. I wouldn't call it mind chatter at all. It's
Okay.
like grand intuitions about life and your purpose here.
Okay.
Because you're mentioning it's about your life path, right? It might
Yeah,
be-
like I do feel so much more at peace when I am aware of my thoughts and of the nonsense that we don't need. But then I feel that there are, I don't know if we want to call it thoughts or higher intuition or whatever that is of value. But my mind is maybe telling me, do I need to turn that off? I don't like.
It's an ongoing process, and as you start to put these things into practice every day, the painful part of your life really subsides. No matter what happens to you that other people would perceive as atrociously difficult, to you it will be just like, it's just life. It's just more experience. Let me see what I can learn from it. And once you change the way you look at it and the way you interact with life, it all becomes far easier. The future.
Or even if I have a decision, and I ask myself 3 times, is that right? To me, that's using intuition, but it's still a process. It's still,
Yes.
and Eckhart makes some of his words sometimes make me feel like he's just so.
It's an ongoing process.
Okay.
But as far as the future, it's entirely in your mind. It's anticipation or fear or dread or whatever you have conjured up in your mind. In 8 days, a week from tomorrow, we're going to be giving a talk about karma. Don't take my karma from me. And we'll be talking about some of the other concepts that have just been touched on during this class. But we want to do an exercise, don't we?
I'll pass these out.
Okay. This is an exercise in
Okay. Choose.
consciousness.
Choose.
Choose a stone that talks to you, and this is yours to keep. So So make sure you choose the right one.
Oh dear.
Really?
No pressure.
We have to give them back, Terry.
Oh, yes.
They're all the
Lots of
right ones,
vibration.
by the way.
You can give the rocks back.
No, it's yours.
We get to keep them.
Yeah,
I think
yes.
one thing that I hear from what you've been saying, at least my interpretation of it, is that she's practicing the execution of choosing whether it's intuition or thought.
Sure.
I think that's part of what you learn as you're going through this process, and this is true for me, is that the chatter's there. I have to live with that, I have to work with that on a daily basis, but I try and be aware of, put the filters up so that maybe I can tell the difference between when it's just chatter and when there is something important that I'm actually supposed to be capturing
Yeah.
from that experience at that moment.
Definitely.
So I think that's some of what you're saying.
All right, this is an exercise in consciousness. So hold the rock in your hand, either one, whichever is most comfortable. And then we're going to grasp it with the other, either 2 fingers or all fingers or however you want to. Just hold the rock. Now, touch it to your forehead and put it back in your hand. Okay. You can all do that, right? Now, we're going to take 5 minutes to do that. In other words, instead of just doing it quickly, you're going to do it as slowly as you can, but still moving. So, it may only be like this. And you can do it eyes open or eyes closed. You can keep them open for a while until you get close, and then close them, however you want to do it. But you're just going to be concentrating on this dumb little rock, and you are just going to see what happens. Okay? All right. And at a certain point, because everybody's going to be in their own world, they're going to be in their own zone, I'll just gong the bowl a couple of times, and then you can finish soon after that if you haven't finished already. But this is just your own experience.
So we have to put it to our forehead and then back to our hand.
So you're going to lift it from your hand as slowly as possible, up to your forehead and then back down. Eyes open, closed, doesn't matter. All right? So here we go. All the trains coming back, is that the same people coming back? Yeah, well, we're happy where they were. We're never happy where we are. We want to be somewhere else. But let's just be happy right now. What time is it?
I have no idea.
Now,
Now!
No, it's now, I'm sorry.
And where are we?
Here.
Here. And what's missing? Is anybody missing anything at this very second? No.
lunch.
Lunch.
Lunch. Oh, but you're thinking of the future and reacting to the past. So you're not in the now. No, but when you are in the now, everything is absolutely perfect. There is no pain, there's no suffering, and there's nothing missing. It's not as if you've given up anything. You're absolutely in equilibrium. You're in perfect condition right now, at this moment. But it depends on your state of mind. All right, anything that we fail to cover? Yes.
I want to see if you could spiritually introduce yourself to a spiritual arena. You're not Paul, that's a instructor.
Well, it has to do with attachment.
Okay.
You know,
That's a good point.
No, that's very good.
I just want to understand it more. It's a tough one for me. Right?
You know, people want to know if you were dealing with all completely enlightened people, there would be no reason at all to introduce anyone. But people, you know, certainly have expectations, and you sometimes have to accede to those. For example, you know, we feel that we have a message in our book that is extremely helpful and useful in the world. We could simply make it available and then disappear and do nothing. But we also feel that we have to make an effort to promote it. Neither one of us are very good, ask Eugene, neither one of us are very good at self-promotion because we don't have a big ego. But you have to sometimes act like you do. You sometimes have to act like it's the most important thing in the world, ego-wise, for everyone to know about it.
Absolutely.
And yet, at the same time, not be attached to it. So it's, you have to be operating in the world, you have to be operating with people who are at different levels of enlightenment. And there's no such thing as unenlightened and enlightened. It's not an on-off switch. It's just simply relative degrees of enlightenment.
I want to add something to that. If I was introducing myself, or if anyone was introducing themselves in front of a group of people, they can say the exact same words in different ways. And it's what Terry said, it's the idea of being attached. So if you say, I'm Paul Benedict and I have, or actually, let's take this quote as an example. This is, so Deepak Chopra wrote a little recommendation here in the bottom. I'm Deepak Chopra, the author of The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. How do you think about that? So, or you can just say it incredibly matter-of-factly with absolutely no ego involved. You can say the same thing. Hello, my name is Deepak Chopra. I wrote the book, The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. I'm here to introduce. Tone, but it's also an energy too. It's of course the tone, the physical tone has to do with it, but it's the way that you feel about it, and that's only you can know. So you can introduce yourself with your credentials or without, or your name, or I'm a male, you know, so and so years old, and it's the way that you feel about it. Does that give you power, or does that take away power, or is it just neutral?
We use some of the video clips from Oprah and Eckhart Tolle's online class in our own class, and it was interesting. Sometimes they would have people from other localities check in, and they would ask questions, and invariably there would be someone who would just be very gushy. Oh, Mr. Tolle, as soon as I saw your book, I knew that it was something important, and I recognized the value of it immediately. And
But I haven't read it yet.
and no, and then they would wait for him to respond to this compliment. They had given him a compliment, and they would wait for him to acknowledge it. He never said, "Oh, thank you. You know, I appreciate that." Ever. He went off onto some other. Because if he did, then that would indicate his ego was responding to their ego. So he never fell into the trap. He always said, perhaps I could point out something too that would be helpful. Or he would just go off, and the people sometimes are left sitting like, didn't you hear what I said? So it was kind of funny, but that's how it was.
Are you offering any classes on the Theosophy? I can't talk. Theosophy?
We will be this fall. We're planning to do a class on Raja Yoga. So if you signed up on our sign-up list, then you will be notified of that.
Good.
Okay. We like to always end with a silent meditation, just start off and end with the same kind of harmonizing.
I think that clock's a little fast too. It's barely 3.
Yeah. And we're fine. It's now. All right. So Eugene, if you don't mind turning the lights off for this part.